And I'm Mackenzie Rossero. We're here with Miami Television News, and today we are thrilled to welcome gymnasts Rachael, Denhollander, and Jordyn Weiber to our studio. Thank you both for being with us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
As two well-known public figures and victims of Larry Nassar, you guys talk about the thought processes of coming forward.
Yeah, for me, I felt like there really wasn't a choice. It was the right thing to do. So when I saw the Indy Star article published, and I thought, this is the first chance to be believed. This is it. It's now or never. It was a moment I had been waiting for, honestly, for 16 years. So there really wasn't a lot of thought process at that moment because we had already discussed what it would look like and how it would have to be done if that opportunity ever arose. But I think it's really important in that process to get to a good place of healing where your identity isn't based on the societal response you receive. Because as most survivors of abuse know, when you first speak up, it doesn't usually go very well.
And I think it's crazy sitting here next to Rachael. I don't think I ever would have spoken out if she didn't sort of start that process and release her story on the Indy Star. And I think it was about a week before his sentencing in Michigan, and at that point I had totally processed what had happened to me or started to process, but I still was not comfortable speaking out publicly. And then I watched the sentencing, and I saw a lot of the other girls telling their story and speaking out, and at that point I felt sort of like a responsibility. I felt like if I can do something to help, or if I can inspire or encourage someone else to speak out, I felt like I had to do that. And I knew that would be not only a good opportunity for other people to be inspired by, but also for my own healing process, and to be able to look our abuser in the eye and say, this is how you affected me. I know a lot of other sexual abuse survivors don't ever get that opportunity. So I think that was sort of my mindset going into it. Thank you both for sharing that.
With the resignations of two USA Gymnastics CEOs in a 2-month span, USA Gymnastics seems to be struggling to find worthwhile leadership since this Larry Nassar scandal. So what type of leadership do you think USA Gymnastics needs in order to prevent more horrific events like those you experienced?
I think there's so many parts that I think, first and foremost, somebody who's going to put safety and the health of athletes over everything. And up until this point, the CEO has been somebody who puts winning over everything, and that has allowed abusers to come in and thrive in environments of gymnastics. And we just have to make sure that doesn't happen again. So somebody who's going to come in, and maybe somebody who's a child safety expert. I think somebody who is going to make sure that safety is the number one priority, and who can lead the organization to that place. That's what we need.
I would absolutely echo that. The most important thing for a leader is the mindset that the leader has towards the people that they're leading, that they're in charge of protecting and caring for. And historically, USAG has picked leaders that prioritize, like Jordyn said, winning and money and medals over the safety of the athletes in their care. And we need the complete opposite at this point. We need someone who understands what abuse looks like, not just sexual, but emotional, physical, verbal, mental abuse, who can pick up on the warning signs, somebody who understands the culture of gymnastics, so that they know the uphill battle for revamping how gymnasts are coached and the culture of the gymnastic structure. But if USAG doesn't start prioritizing that type of person, I don't think we're going to see the type of change that we need to have at the organizational level in order to keep our athletes safe.
And just going off that, what additional changes do you think the organization needs in addition to leadership, and how do you think this will help the organization move forward after the Larry Nassar scandal? I think in a lot of ways we're still unclear from a USA Gymnastics leadership standpoint how this happened. I think we still don't have a lot of answers as survivors. So I think that's the first thing, is we need USA Gymnastics to fully accept its accountability and responsibility for what happened, and understand how it all happened. And then, like you said, we need new leadership. We need new people that are going to come in and completely change the system and make sure that this doesn't happen again. And then from a national team training standpoint, I think we're starting to see a little more transparency. We're starting to see a lot of small changes in terms of the treatment of the athletes, and I think that needs to continue going in that direction, to make sure that their health and their safety is the priority over winning. And I think if that can start changing, then those ideas sort of seep into the club gyms around the country. I think coaches continually mimic other good coaches. So we sort of have to restructure that idea of what makes a good coach.
how do we treat our athletes, and what are their priorities. So I think if we can create that on the national team level, that will start to seep into the club gymnastics level and just totally transform gymnastics and the environment that is gymnastics.
I would agree with all of that, and I think the most important thing at this point is that I don't think USAG has the public confidence and the ability to do what needs to be done. The reality is that all of the people that are on the board have been insiders within USAG, and they have demonstrated over the last 6 months that they have no desire to change the culture. We need somebody who's going to come in here and say there are serious problems. We need to find out what happened. Not just with Larry, but with all of these other abusive coaches. It was discovered that USAG had buried the files of 54 coaches accused of sexual abuse over a 10-year period. So there are deep problems in USAG that need to be rooted out, just with how our coaching structure is done, the culture of the gyms. To commission an independent investigation, say we're going to understand what the culture of gymnastics is like, we're going to identify where these abusive problems are happening, what the dynamics are that are leading to abuse, then we're going to tell the truth about it. We're going to call it what it is, we're going to say it's wrong and that it's unacceptable and that we won't tolerate that in this organization anymore, and then we're going to start elevating the coaches who do it differently. But the board is not willing to do that right now, and until we get to that point, it's going to be the same old revolving door of appointing people who are enabling abusers and then having to backtrack when there's a public outcry.
Absolutely, thank you. So here in Oxford, we have had a dramatic increase in reported sexual assaults this fall. And though it's impossible to really gauge if that's just an increase in reported sexual assaults or an increase in sexual assaults overall, I'm inclined to think that people are becoming more willing to report when they are sexually assaulted, and that the current climate is giving victims courage, hearing stories from people like you. So do you think that people are becoming more willing to report these crimes, or what do you think is instigating this change?
I'd like to think that it's because they're feeling more able to speak out against their abuser or tell their story. I'd like to think that that's the result of the Me Too movement, and in seeing all of the girls who stood up in the courtroom and told their story and gave their victim impact statement. I'd like to think that we inspired or encouraged other people to do the same. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if Rachael does, but I think just hearing that, I would like to think that it's because they feel more able to tell their story.
I think we're definitely seeing some of that. I've gotten a lot of private messages even from prosecutors and detectives saying I'm having far more survivors come forward, and they're telling me that they watched what you girls did and they finally had hope that they would be believed. And this university isn't the only university that's seeing a significant uptick in reports of sexual assault. And so I'm encouraged by that there are survivors that are feeling like they might be heard. What is very grievous to me is that what we did was not that earth-shattering. We just had someone who listened to us. We just told the truth. That could have happened decades ago. That could have happened for us. That could have happened for survivors years ago. What it takes to make a survivor feel safe to come forward is simply being willing to listen and believe. Those are very simple things that we all could have and should have been doing decades ago.
Thank you both for sharing that. And just like Mackenzie said, we've seen nationally the conversation of sexual assault really growing. And we've seen more victims speaking out, like you and your teammates, and like Dr. Ford in the Kavanaugh scandal. Can you talk maybe to the victims who still don't have that courage to report? What advice would you give to them?
I think first and foremost, you have to do it on your own timing. You have to do it when you're ready to do it. You can't force somebody to do it when they're not ready. I think, some people know what's happening to them at the time, but for me, I didn't know what was happening. So it took me a long time to process that, and I went all the way from denial that it was even sexual abuse to, all the way on the other side where I accepted that this had happened to me and he had taken advantage of me. So I think everybody has their own timeline of processing, and we can't judge each other based on what that is. And so I think that's the important thing to realize, and just we were talking earlier about just really creating an open environment where people feel comfortable speaking out, and making sure that the right structures are in place so that there is a place for people to go to report that. I think that's a really important thing in terms of college campuses and things like that, but I don't know if you want to add to that.
I think what I would say to survivors in that situation is it matters. And we grieve it with you. Yeah, and we see it, and you're not alone. Because that's what a survivor needs to know. Yeah, and that's true regardless of whether they're at the point where they can come forward. And getting to that point where you can come forward is a very long process, and it's very difficult. So we need to be in a position where we are supporting the survivors and their boundaries and their decisions, and being willing just to grieve with them. And to be able to get to the point where you understand that the societal response you receive, and whether or not you get that vote from 12 members on a jury or even have charges pressed, that doesn't change the wrongness of what happened to you. It doesn't change that you can grieve it, that you can tell the truth about it, because the truth isn't dependent on the societal response you receive. And I think that's a message we need to be sending loud and clear to survivors, is that your truth can't be taken away from you by society minimizing it. You know what the truth is, and you can hold to that, no matter what anyone else says and does. And because you can do that, you can grieve the damage that's been done. And being able to grieve in ways that are non-destructive is really the first step to healing.
I really appreciate how you pointed out all that's required of someone to listen to a survivor story is that they listen and have the faith in that person to believe their story. And that really, I think, simplifies a lot of the problem. It can be brought down to needing to listen and being willing to understand someone, and I think that puts a lot of things into perspective for people who are unwilling to do those things and should be. But returning to gymnastics and envisioning the future of the sport and the young gymnasts who are inspired by you but maybe fear the consequences of being a female athlete in this Me Too world, in this Me Too climate that we're in, what do you envision is their future as an athlete or as a gymnast, or how would you encourage them, or would you encourage them?
I envision a better environment and a safer environment for little girls, because I love the sport of gymnastics, and that has been sort of my motivating factor through all of this, and coming to places like this and telling my story. It's not something that is necessarily easy or fun to do, but I understand how important it is, because I do care about the sport. I do want it to be safe for young girls. I want to be able to confidently say, yeah, you should put your daughter in gymnastics, and yes, she'll have a good experience and she'll come out on the other end feeling joyful and feeling healthy. But right now I don't feel confident saying that entirely. So I think that's sort of been a motivation for me, is that I feel gymnastics is such a amazing sport to learn life lessons, if not the number one sport to learn life lessons. I was able to do that as a gymnast growing up, and I feel like the sport made me into the strong, confident person that I am today. But also I paid a horrible price for that, and that's the part that we need to fix. And we're not backing down, and we're just continuing this conversation, and we're continuing to talk to the media until people start listening. Everybody starts listening, and they get new leadership at USA Gymnastics and new board and all of these things that we're asking for. So I think that I hope for a better future for USA Gymnastics and for gymnastics around the world, in fact, because I know this is not an isolated incident, and this is not just with gymnastics, it's with all sports.
Yeah, I mean, I share that vision, that little girls who come after us are able to speak up, and they're able to participate in the sport in a healthy environment and come out on the other side and love what they did and what they learned through it. To those athletes that are in it right now, I would tell them you're worth it. You're worth raising your voice, you're worth standing up, you're worth more than the medals, you're worth more than the money. And if it actually does come down to a choice for you between having to switch gyms or even ending your career so that you can save your physical and emotional and mental health, you're worth it. And so that they understand that they really do have a choice, and they're worth making that choice. And if it isn't a healthy environment for them, they can speak up and they can say something, and they are worth more than the money or the medals that they might lose by speaking up.
Thank you.
Thank you both for sharing that. So now we are going to open the floor to our studio audience. So if anybody has a question, just come up to the mic.
Hello. I saw in today's paper the New York police apologized to a 1994 rape victim for how they handled her case, and it made me wonder, did you receive any apologies, and what did that mean to you, and are there any you wish you had received?
I have not received, it's from the people at USA Gymnastics and Michigan State and USOC, I didn't receive any apologies that weren't public apologies on social media or very general like that. I didn't receive any personal ones. I don't know about Rachael, but that's something that has been extremely hurtful, because it just, for a while it seemed like they didn't care that this had happened. They didn't care that they had a part in this. And that's a very difficult thing. So yeah, I don't know, did you receive any apologies?
No, that's one of the things that we've been asking for consistently, is simply for these organizations to say, this is what went wrong, and we're so sorry. We understand the consequences for what we did, and we haven't gotten that. And the reality is, saying I'm sorry something bad happened is not the same thing as saying I'm sorry we did something that allowed that to happen. So I don't believe what we've received is an apology. The statements that have gone on social media, they're not apologies, they're not a recognition of the problem. And until we have that, there's been no heart change at either of the organizations that shielded one of the worst predators and sexual predators in U.S. history.
Hi, sorry, nervous. So I just want to say first, thank you so much for your strength and bravery that you've shown through this whole thing. It's honestly incredibly inspirational. So in this new societal environment with the Me Too movement and a lot of attention being brought to that, what are some steps that maybe Miami University, for example, could take with its institutional combat of sexual assault, and especially keeping survivors in mind throughout that?
Yeah, I think opening up the dialogue is a great way to start to communicate from a university standpoint. We're going to have these conversations. They matter and they're important, and we're going to listen. That's a great place to start. To continue advocacy, to use the platforms of social media and your campus media to talk about these issues and to communicate to survivors that we're going to discuss them and you're going to be heard and we're going to take this seriously. That is what creates an unsafe environment for a predator and a safe environment for a survivor to speak up.
Yeah, I think to add to that, understanding that as students you guys have a strong voice and you guys have a really powerful position, because you guys can band together and you can decide the culture that you guys want for your campus, and you guys can stand up for what you believe in.
So Jordyn, thank you both for coming, by the way, but Jordyn, I know you've been working with UCLA Gymnastics recently,
Mm-hmm.
and I was wondering, obviously this whole negative episode hasn't affected your love of the sport, and you still seem to want to be involved in gymnastics. And I was just wondering if you could talk about that a little bit. How did you have a time where you thought, do I want to be involved in gymnastics anymore, or are you able to kind of separate the negative things that happened from your positive enjoyment of the sport?
Yeah. So when I went to UCLA, I couldn't compete in college gymnastics because I had professional status in the sport. But at that point, I knew that I still wanted to be a part of a college team. So when I went to UCLA, I started working with the college team. I was actually a team manager for the first 3 years. And at that point, like you said, I thought, I've been in the gym my whole life, basically. I think this is going to be the end, and then I'll go on and get a job, and that would be, the end of the gymnastics chapter for me. But my senior year, our head coach asked me if I wanted to start coaching. And at first I was like, not really, but I figured I'd take the opportunity while I had it, and it could be a good challenge for me to help out the team or learn something new about myself or something. So I decided to start coaching, and I think that love of gymnastics just came back, and I can't get it out of my blood now, because it's not about helping the girls execute their skills better or the technical part of it or winning national championships. For me, it's about these girls who are in college for 4 years, and college is a time where you transform so much. And you go from, and a lot of these girls come from maybe abusive environments, maybe really strict, maybe very intense environments. Some of them have been sexually, verbally, emotionally abused. And then they come to college and they have to figure out a way to find joy in the sport again. And helping them and mentoring them through that time has been something that gives me so much meaning, and I really feel like it's part of the way that I can give back to the sport and make the sport more positive in this time that just feels so negative, and there's this evil surrounding gymnastics right now. So I feel like that's my way of partially giving back in helping these girls find their love of the sport again, and creating a culture at UCLA where we don't prioritize winning. We make sure that they're happy and healthy humans, and we develop them as humans, which then the gymnastics comes after. And we truly feel that if they are happy and healthy, then the gymnastics comes after that. They're able to be successful because they feel strong and they feel healthy as a human. So that's something that we really focus on at UCLA, and it's just given me so much joy and passion to be able to do that.
I think that would be a good motto for many things too. I think there's a lot of gymnastics, other sports. There's so many aspects of life that people take to such an extreme that they neglect the such important aspects of life of being happy and healthy. So I think that's an absolutely wonderful outlook and a great way to handle people, and like you said, such a transformative period of their lives.
All right, well, thank you both so much for joining us and sharing your experiences and perspectives. It's really inspiring to all of us here, so thank you. And thank you to our studio audience for their wonderful questions too. So I'm Margot Austin.
And I'm Mackenzie Rossero for Miami Television News.